Time for those 2025 bold predictions. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you 5 days a week, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. This is our last basically show of the year before the regular season. So I thought, what better way to celebrate the impending start of the NFL season than with some bold predictions about the Buccaneers in 2025. I'll get to the defense. I'll get to overall team predictions. I'm even going to sprinkle in a couple of overall NFL predictions. That's all coming up in a little bit. But I want to start this one off with the offense. And when you think about the Bucs offense, you're going to think of Baker Mayfield. Bold prediction number 1. Baker Mayfield doesn't get to 4,500 yards again, but he still hits 40 touchdowns while lowering his interceptions from last year. I did a dive a few weeks ago about quarterbacks that hit the 4,500 yard, 40 touchdown mark in a season and what they did the season after. Baker is one of 10 quarterbacks to ever do it, but only 2 have ever done it back-to-back seasons. That was Drew Brees and Tom Brady in his first 2 years with the Buccaneers. I don't think that Baker hits the 4,500 yard plateau this season, but I feel a large part of that is going to be because he doesn't have to. Between the defense getting a lot better and the running game being a big part of their offensive identity, Baker isn't going to have to put the team on his back and overcome deficits nearly as much as he did last season. The most important part of this prediction is that the touchdowns are still really high, but the interceptions come down. Maybe it's not by much. Could be from 16 to 13 or 14, but you want them to come down regardless. Any decrease in turnovers is a positive. I think the weapons that he has allows him to still rack up ridiculous touchdown production and keep the Bucs up there as one of the top offenses in the league. Bold prediction number 2. Bucky Irving finishes in the top 5 in the NFL in rushing yards. Last year, Bucky finished as the number 10 running back in rushing yards with 1,122. The number 5 rusher in the NFL was Jahmyr Gibbs, who had 1,412 yards. So less than 200 rushing yards more than what Bucky had was the difference between number 5 and number 10. Gibbs finished with 43 more attempts than what Irving had, and he rushed for 5.6 yards per carry compared to Bucky's 5.4. Given that Bucky didn't take over as the RB1 until the second half of the season, we're likely going to see his carries increase this year from 207 to closer to the 260, 270 range, which might even be a little bit of a conservative estimate, depending on how often the Bucs are going to be utilizing Rachaad White, Sean Tucker, and Josh Williams. Gibbs was the only running back in the top 5 last year with fewer than 300 carries. Bucky was the only one in the top 10 with fewer than 250. And I'm not doing this comparison to say that Bucky is going to be better than Gibbs or that he's going to overtake Gibbs as a better running back in the NFL or anything like that. I'm doing it because this is how close Bucky was to being 5 spots higher on the NFL's rushing leader list last season. If he stays healthy and gets the same kind of workload all season that he got over the last 7 weeks of last year, then he would have been on pace with that workload for 1,455 yards and 10 touchdowns. Remember, one of those games was against the Raiders when he rushed 4 times for 3 yards before leaving with an injury. 0 games for Bucky Irving in the first 10 weeks with 15 or more carries. 5 out of the last 6 games, he had more than 15. With that kind of opportunity, Bucky is going to be a monster in the backfield for the Bucs, and one of the reasons Baker doesn't have to throw the ball quite as much this season. Bold prediction number 3. Emeka Egbuka will lead all rookie wide receivers in yards and touchdowns this season, while finishing with over 1,000 yards and getting double-digit touchdowns. We are talking potential rookie of the year candidate level production. I don't care about Travis Hunter or the hype around him. I don't care that Ted McMillan is the number 1 option in Carolina and is going to get those Mike Evans targets in the Canales offense that we saw in 2023. I don't care about Matthew Golden being overdrafted in Green Bay. Emeka Egbuka begins his run now as the best receiver in this draft class, the same way Mike Evans did in 2014. And that is by getting over 1,000 yards and reaching the end zone at least 10 times. For Evans, it was 1,051 yards and a dozen touchdowns off of the arms of Josh McCown and Mike Glennon. Egbuka, starting off in that Godwin role with a much better quarterback situation, is going to be hyper-targeted early on. And then as Godwin works his way back and McMillan works his way back, Egbuka will have already established himself as a favorite target of Baker's because of his sure hands and his big playability. Not only that, but it isn't going to take long before Egbuka becomes one of Baker's favorite third down targets because of those sure hands. So that kind of trust is going to be rewarded by both Baker and, of course, offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard. I know that I have hyped this kid up since he was drafted, but it's for a good reason. He is unbelievably talented, and he's going to make noise immediately in this offense as one of the key players that will help the Bucs win another NFC South crown. Bold prediction number 4. Mike Evans breaks Jerry Rice's record for consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. Yeah. You can laugh or make fun of me because it's not very bold to say that a player who has gotten 1,000 yards every season of his career is going to get 1,000 yards again. However, it is bold to say that someone is going to do something that has never been done in the history of the NFL. Maybe it's fitting that Mike Evans will be the one to break the record, considering Jerry Rice's streak ended against the Buccaneers when he went down to a torn ACL and MCL in week 1 back in 1997. And I either didn't know or didn't remember this, but Jerry Rice played in week 16 that same year. What? A torn ACL and MCL, and he was back on the field 15 weeks later? That is absolute insanity. I don't know who his doctor was, but I cannot believe that a real licensed medical doctor cleared this man that quickly. My son was still on crutches and hobbling around in a full leg brace 15 weeks after his surgery, and he didn't tear his MCL. That's absolutely insane. Shout out to Jerry Rice. That man was not human. Anyway, I had to kind of go down that rabbit hole for just a second because I'm sure, like me, a lot of you had no idea that this man had surgery on a torn ACL and MCL and was back on a field 15 weeks later. Granted, he scored a touchdown when he came back and then proceeded to break his kneecap, probably because he came back too soon and his body hadn't healed. But back to Mike Evans. With Baker as his quarterback, Evans has finished with 1,255 yards and then the 1,004 yards last year after missing 3.5 games, while having 13 and 11 touchdowns in those 2 years. While last year was his lowest yards per reception average at 13.6, I expect that number to return closer to the 14.5 to 15 yards per reception that he's hovered around over the course of the last couple of seasons. And just to put the cherry on top of this one, we are not going to have to wait until week 18 for Mike Evans to hit that 1,000 yards this time around. Time to talk about that defense. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, Locked On Bucs fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You could make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas that you already needed. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code TOUCHDOWN. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Right now, you can grab tickets to the Bucs home opener against the Jets with those epic 1976 throwbacks on full display for under $100. And it's not just sports. I'm not kidding when I tell you that I just got concert tickets for my sons and I with a zone deal. And let's just say that I have not paid that little for a concert ticket in over 20 years. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go download Game Time today. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can find the link in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, just scan the QR code that's up on your screen. Time to flip things over to the defensive side of the ball, and we are going to start hot. Bold prediction number 1 for the defense. The Buccaneers defense gets at least 15 interceptions. They made it a point of emphasis this offseason, and Bowles talked nonstop about about taking the ball away, starting all the way back at the combine. He wants ball hawks. They have to focus on taking the ball away, not just breaking up passes. Throughout camp in the preseason, the defense answered the call. You went out and you drafted guys that can take the ball away in Morrison and Parrish. You have the pieces to do it as long as they stay healthy. The Bucs finished with 7 interceptions last year as a team, so I think that they can get a little more than double that this year. Only 18 takeaways total, which left them with a turnover differential of -5. Now, the most takeaways in the NFL was the Steelers with 33, but the Bills had the best turnover differential with a +24, which is absolutely incredible. I think that this group with the rookies, plus McCollum, a healthy Antoine, Tyke, Levante, Izzy, and Merriweather, there's a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball that can read, react, and take the football away. I expect a huge, like astronomical improvement in takeaways over last season. Bold prediction number 2. The Bucs will have a player reach double-digit sacks this season, and it is absolutely not the player you think it is. I feel like this defense has a lot of guys that can rack up 7 to 9 sacks this season. I mean, there's the talent where you have, numerous guys that are capable of getting double-digit sacks, but I think the Bucs will have probably around like 3 to 4 players that actually finish the season in that 7 to 9 range. However, I think there is one that is going to break out and really establish himself as a force in the NFL. And I am talking about finishing with a dozen or more sacks this season. It's not Yaya Diaby. It's not Hassan Reddick. It's Kalijah Kancey. Kancey was an absolute monster for this team last year, and he finished with a team-high 7.5 sacks. But he missed 5 games. He was already on pace last year for 10.5 sacks. And I feel like with the addition of Reddick, a healthy Voss behind him at linebacker coming in on blitzes, not to mention that Kancey is healthy and actually gets to start the season next to Vita, this kid is going to have his best season yet. 4 sacks as a rookie, 7.5 last season, double-digit tackles for loss in both of his NFL seasons. This is a chance for him to really explode and take his game to the next level. So if he gets, let's say, a dozen, he gets 12 sacks, then we can say Yaya, Reddick, Vita, they all together average 7 sacks per player. That's 33 right there. They're all capable of hitting those numbers together this season. We've seen them all hit those numbers in some way, shape, or form before, outside of Kancey getting, a double-digit sacks. But again, he was on pace for that had he played the full 17 games. So he gets those sacks at that fast of a clip. It's just a matter of putting together 17 games. But that right there is 33 sacks among 4 players. The team as a whole had 46 sacks last season. That was still tied for 6th in the NFL, but they can build on that and be even better this year. And all that pressure is going to be a big reason that the first bold prediction comes true and they get all those interceptions. Bold prediction number 3. Benjamin Morrison takes over for Jamel Dean as the starting corner before Chris Godwin returns to play. Maybe I'm just trying to speak this into existence, but I think Morrison was already pushing Dean in camp and making the case to go out there and be a starter before he suffered the setback with the hamstring injury. I wanted to just, say that he would take over after week 4, but that seemed to make it sound like I think the Eagles cooked the Bucs, and I don't know that that's going to happen. It is conceivable that Dean gets cooked, but the Bucs still win the game. But I think the talent of Morrison and either the struggles that Dean has or an injury will open the door for Morrison to get the start. And from there, it's done. It's over. He's not looking back. We get M&M on the field as your starting outside corners. And I'm not trying to wish harm on Dean. I want him to succeed. If he does well, that means the team is doing well. I want all of these players to play great football, but I'm also a realist, and I know what I've seen in the past. I know what we saw in the preseason game against the Steelers. Dean is holding on to that job for dear life, and there's a lot of Bucs fans waiting for Morrison to get his shot. Bold prediction number 4. The Bucs finish as a top 5 scoring defense. Last year, the Bucs allowed 22.6 points per game, which was terrible. The 5th best scoring defense in the league was Minnesota, who allowed 19.5. So you're talking a field goal a game difference on average, but they are going to be one of just, I guess this is kind of a bonus bold prediction. The Bucs are going to be one of just 2 teams in the NFL at the end of 2025 that are in the top 5 in scoring offense and scoring defense. It all boils down to health, but Bowles has the pieces he needs to operate the defense the way he wants to, the way he did during the Brady years, when players were coming from all over to create pressure, and he could do a ton of disguises and really confuse offenses. That's how it's built for this year. So that's what Bucs fans should expect to see all year long. Rounding out my bold predictions, that is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up. College football is this weekend, and whether you've got your eye on a big-name quarterback or a breakout running back, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. Prize Picks is simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. The flex play option is a total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you still can double your money. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. Wrapping things up here on a prediction episode of Locked On Bucs and some overall bold predictions to finish things up. And I'm going to start with special teams. The Buccaneers will score 2 special teams touchdowns this season. I don't know if it'll be kick or punt returns, but with Tez Johnson and Josh Williams back there on return duties, both of these guys are just too electric to not find the end zone at some point this season. I'll say they get one of each. They get a punt return and a kick return for a touchdown, but the return team is going to be must see all year long when those two are back there and trying to flip the field. For overall team success, I'm going to drop these, although I'm not sure I would categorize all of them as bold, but this team is going to finish 11-6. I think a 2-2 start is likely with Wirfs and Godwin out, though I could see them sneaking out 3-1. But even at 2-2, that would mean that they go 9-4 the rest of the way and win another NFC South title. Like I said in our divisional preview show, if you haven't seen that, go back, check it out. I don't think it gets to week 18 this year to decide who wins the division. The Bucs are going to have it locked up earlier, and they're going to be heading to the postseason for the 6th straight year. As for the postseason, I guess you can call this bold, but I'm calling a conference championship appearance. They got to the divisional round 2 years ago. They made some mistakes and cost themselves in the first round last year, but the Bucs are certainly in the conversation as one of the 2 best teams in the NFC, and I think they proved that this year by making it that far and playing in the conference championship. Now, I'm not going to predict anything past that because there are teams that I would be really confident in the Buccaneers beating in the NFC Championship, but there are other teams that would make me really nervous if they were the matchup. But I've been steadfast in my belief that this team is worthy of being in those conversations. So, hey, Bucs, I know some of you listen to this show. If you guys could go ahead and back me up on all of this that I've been saying for months and months and months, that, you guys deserve to be in a conversation with the Eagles and the Bills and the Ravens and the Chiefs and the Lions and all these teams that constantly get talked about as Super Bowl contenders, because I, have the honest, true belief that you can beat any of those teams. So if you could go ahead and do that for me and make me look super, super smart, I'd really appreciate it. Finally, my last bold predictions here. I'm going to be picking 2 teams from each conference that made the playoffs last year, and I don't think that they make the playoffs this year. It's usually about half the teams that made the playoffs the year before will not return the following season, but I'm just going to point to 2 in the NFC and then 2 in the AFC. For the NFC, I'm going with the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Rams. To me, it's a quarterback issue for both teams. I don't think JJ McCarthy can do for the Vikings what Sam Darnold did last season. I wasn't a big JJ McCarthy believer through the draft process, and I don't think he was that guy at Michigan. That's why I didn't believe in him as an NFL prospect. He operated a very safe, run-heavy offense, and that's not what the Vikings are going to be. For all the weapons that he has in the pass game, yeah, you can keep it to those short routes and just get the ball into the hands of Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison as quickly as possible, and then hope that they get a lot of yards after catch. But he's not going to be airing it out the way Sam Darnold did last season. So I don't, as good as their defense is and as much talent as they do have, I just don't see the Vikings being the world beaters that they were last year. I think they're going to take a huge step backwards. As for the Rams, I just cannot imagine that Matthew Stafford makes it through the entire season. I don't know how he's playing at all. He missed most of camp with a really nasty back injury, and I don't see that getting any better for him. It's not going to get better for him. That's basically how back injuries work. When you're talking about compression on the spine, it's not going to get any better when you're out there taking the physical toll that an NFL player takes. After a couple of weeks of being knocked around, that back is going to flare up. It's going to tighten up, and he's not going to be able to perform. And at that point, if you're relying on Jimmy Garoppolo, you're not going to make the playoffs. I don't want that to happen to him. I like Stafford. I think he's a great dude. I think he's fun to watch. I just think that his body can't hold up in the world of being a professional football player anymore. And he probably should have gone ahead and retired before he ends up doing something that really affects the rest of his life. I mean, Stafford's got 50, 60 years of life left. And I just think it's a mistake for him to come back and try to play with as nasty as this back issue seems to be for him. For the AFC, I'm going with the Chargers and the Steelers. Look, Aaron Rodgers is cooked. Pittsburgh's going to tread enough water to do what they always do, which is finish 9-8. But this time around, they're not going to make the postseason. I think that the Bengals, even with that atrocious defense, is going to score enough to win 10 games and make it as a wild card team. At that point, they'll get absolutely obliterated because you're not going to win in the playoffs unless your defense is at least competent, and Cincinnati's is not. As for the Chargers, I just don't think they can sneak out as many wins as they did last year. I think the Broncos have drastically improved. I would think that the Broncos are legitimately in the mix to win the AFC West. I think they're going to challenge Kansas City and really put some pressure on them. So both of those teams, I would say, probably collectively finish 3-1 against the Chargers. There's going to be that surprise team that comes out of nowhere. We hear it every year. There's, the worst to first and all that stuff. But there's a team that was terrible last year that is going to end up making the postseason this year. And to me, that team in the AFC is going to be New England. Vrabel calling the shots. You got May at quarterback. I love Travion Henderson this year in New England. Then with Vrabel revamping the defense, I think they can do enough with their schedule to take the Chargers wild card spot from last year. I mean, the Dolphins, they're on the way down. McDaniel is kind of a sitting duck, which I feel bad. I like Josh McDaniel. Mike McDaniel. But I mean, the Pats get the Raiders, they get Miami twice, they get the Jets twice, the Titans, the Browns, the Saints, the Giants. They have a really favorable, winnable schedule. So that's kind of my dark horse playoff team for this season. And it's going to come at the expense of somebody. And I think the Chargers schedule is a lot more difficult. I don't think they're going to be able to replicate the success they had last year. But you know what? Harbaugh's a darn good coach, and he seems to figure out a way to get it done every year. So that's kind of my overall NFL prediction there. But that's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Follow on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs at both of those spots. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Become an insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to be an insider, it's real easy. Like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding holiday weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.